Let's try one more time. Good afternoon, everyone. I love it. We're all present. My name is Jackie Pena, Dean of Faculty here at Miami-Dade College, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the 2017 Miami Book Fair. Woo! There we go. Excitement, that's what I love. Just so that you know, the book fair doesn't end today or this weekend. We have activities for Street Fair this weekend, but beyond, we have programs, activities, and events all over Miami and here at Miami-Dade College throughout the year. So please share that information and join us throughout the year for these events. I want to also take a moment to acknowledge our premier sponsors, the Knight Foundation, OHL Arellano and the Bachelor Foundation, the DeGroot Foundation. I also want to thank the Friends of the Book Fair. Without your support, we wouldn't be able to make all this possible, as well as Miami-Dade College, the convener and host of the fair. It takes a village, a very big city maybe, to make the book fair possible. So thanks to everyone who's been a part of it and all the sponsors. Yes, a round of applause, yes. So I'm going to share two more quick things. First is Miami-Dade College, our premier college, offers programming and opportunities for everyone in all sorts of careers, whether you like technology, like coding, robotics, hospitality. We have a little bit of everything with hundreds of programs. So please visit our recruitment booth, but you can also go online at www.mdc.edu to learn more about our programs. And we offer a lot for dual enrollment. You can actually take credit classes while you're still in high school and start working towards a degree at that age for free. So learn more by going into our website. And my last message is that at the end of the session, we will have a short Q&A. We have a mic here in the middle of the room, and you'll be able to line up to be able to ask our author questions today. And the author will be autographing books as well on this floor. Did you get all of that? Yes? All right. At this time, I'm going to ask you to please silence your cell phones. And it is now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Frank Ramirez, the district manager for Wells Fargo, who will be coming to introduce our speaker. Thank you so much for being here today, and enjoy this time together.
How's everyone doing today? Awesome. So you guys are in for a good treat today. So make sure you get relaxed, get your questions ready to go, because we have an awesome person coming up. Welcome to the Miami Book Fair. At Wells Fargo, we're committed to the communities we serve. That's why we support programs and organizations that we believe are important to the future for the community's vitalities and success. In 2016, Wells Fargo invested more than $12 million in nonprofit organizations and schools in Florida that are working to strengthen our diverse communities. Today, we are happy to join the book fair and to introduce Jean Yang. Jean Yang is the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature and a MacArthur Fellow, a recipient of what's popularly known as the MacArthur Genius Grant. He began drawing comic books in the 5th grade, and in 1997 received a Xeric Grant for his first comic, Gordon Yamamoto and the King of the Greeks. He has since written and drawn many titles, including Duncan's Kingdom, The Rosary Comic Book, Prime Baby, and Animal Crackers. American-born Chinese, his first graphic novel, From Second First, was a National Book Award finalist, as well as the winner of the Prince Award and an Eisner Award. He also won an Eisner for The Eternal Smile, a collaboration with Derek Kirk Kim. He is the author of the Secret Coders series with artist Mike Holmes, and has written for the hit comics Avatar, The Last Airbender, and Superman. Secret Coders, Secrets and Sequence is the third book in the Secret Coders series from Jean Yang and Mike Holmes. Stately Academy is no ordinary school. It was once home to an elite institute where teachers, students, and robots worked together to unravel the mysteries of the coding. Hopper, Eni, and Josh won't rest until they've learned the whole story, but they aren't the only ones interested in the school's past. In this installment, Principal Dean is hot on their trail, demanding that the coders turn over their most powerful robot. Dean may be a creep, but he's nothing compared to the guy who's really in charge, a green-skinned coding genius named Professor 10. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Gene Yang.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. This is my third or fourth time at the Miami Book Fair, and every time I have such amazing amounts of fun. My name is Gene. This is what I look like in real life. That is what I look like as a cartoon. And today I'm going to talk to you all about two things that I absolutely love. The first of these things is comic books. How many of you love comic books? Anyone love comic books? Almost everybody. That's great. Well, I love comics. I love comics so much that is how I make my living now. I am a cartoonist, which means I write and draw comic books and graphic novels. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Here are some of the comics and graphic novels that I've written and drawn during those past 20 years. About 5 years ago, I got involved with these books right here. Now, how many of you have ever seen this show called Avatar: The Last Airbender? Almost everybody. Avatar: The Last Airbender ran on Nickelodeon from 2005 to 2008, but people are still watching that show. They're watching on the internet, they're watching on YouTube, they're watching on Amazon Prime. After the show ended, Nickelodeon asked a comic book company called Dark Horse Comics to produce a series of graphic novels that would continue the story, that would basically tell you what happens to Aang and all his friends as they get older. And I am one of the authors that works on these books. I have to tell you, writing these stories has been amazing. The best part of this gig is I get to call Mike DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, the two animators who created the original show. And they totally call me back. It's awesome. It's like we're best friends. About 3 years ago, I started working for DC Comics, the publishers of Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. I did a 10-issue run for them on Superman. And then after that, they asked me to write about this brand new character. A character that they called the new Superman. This character is a 17-year-old Chinese kid growing up in Shanghai. He inherits some of Clark Kent's powers, and he becomes the new Superman, the Superman of China. These are the first 3 issues. Issue number 17 actually just came out this past week. So I love comic books. I write comic books now. I draw comic books. I fell in love with comic books when I was in the 5th grade. This is what I look like as a 5th grader. You laugh, but I gotta tell you, this was the 80s. Everybody kind of looked like that. Just go home and look at your parents' photos. I guarantee you, everybody kind of looked like that. I fell in love with comic books because of this issue right here. Now, when I was a kid, every local bookstore had what was called a spinner rack. This was a wireframe rack. It would carry a month's worth of comics. It usually sat in the corner of the store. You could spin the whole thing so that you could see them all. One night, my mom took me to my local bookstore when I was in 5th grade, and I saw this cover sitting on that spinner rack. And as soon as I saw it, I knew I needed to own that comic book. I just thought these two characters look so awesome. One of them is a rock monster. The other one kind of looks like a robot. I want to find out what was up. I wanted to find out what the adventure was all about. So I brought this up to my mom and said, Mom, from the depths of my being, I need to own this. Will you please buy it for me? And she took one look at this cover and she said, no, absolutely not. Those two characters look way too scary and they're gonna give you nightmares. One of them looks like he's bleeding out of his eyes. There's no way you're buying that book. She made me put this back. To this day, I've never read this story, so I have no idea what their adventure is all about. But my mom saw how sad I was about putting this back on the spinner rack. She wanted me to leave with a comic book in my hand, so she chose this for me. She chose the latest Superman comic. These days, I'm a huge Superman fan. I've gotten to write the character. But when I was in 5th grade, I was not. When I was in 5th grade, I thought out of all of the superheroes out there, Superman was the most boring one. And that is why my mom chose Superman for me, right? Because he's super well behaved. Superman always does the right thing. He's not scary looking at all, unlike those other two characters. He doesn't punch anybody unless he has to, and afterwards he feels kind of bad about it. He flies around in this blue uniform. He's like this giant flying Boy Scout going around Metropolis looking for good deeds to do. Well, I was disappointed, but I brought this home and I read it, and in this story, the atomic bomb drops. It kills off almost everybody on the planet. The few survivors that are left, they gather themselves into these little societies, and all the police are dead, so these societies are kind of crazy. A group of men have to get together, they dress up like knights, they ride around on these giant mutated dogs, and they start fighting crime. They call themselves the Atomic Knights. Superman, being Superman, is one of the survivors. He teams up with these guys. They have this adventure together. And in the last couple of pages, they reveal that the whole issue is just this dream that's going on in somebody's head. But that did not stop this book from freaking me out. I stayed up nights thinking about the atomic bomb, about mutated dogs, about Superman, and about comic books, about how these drawings on a page did something inside my head that had never been done before. And pretty soon after this, I went from being a comic book reader to comic book creator, within just a few weeks. This is one of my favorite things about comics, is that the dividing line between who is a reader and who is a creator is super thin. It's super easy to cross. If you want to become a comic book creator, just go home, pull out some pens and paper, and draw a comic, and there you are. That's exactly what I did when I was in 5th grade. My best friend back then was this kid named Jeremy. Together, we started making comic books. At lunch, we would sit at the lunch tables, we'd come up with stories. I'd do all the pencils, he'd do all the inks. We'd give our originals to his mom, who would take them to work with her, wait till all of her coworkers went home, and sneak photocopies for us. Then we took these photocopies, we stapled them by hand, we sold them to our friends for 50 cents a piece. We made $8. It was amazing. That was the beginning of my comic book career. Now, Jeremy has since given up on comics. He no longer reads comics. He no longer makes comics. He's now a radiologist. He makes a lot of money. He lives in this giant house in Hawaii, which is really good for him. But I kept making comics. I kept making comics through the 5th grade, through the 6th grade. Then in 7th grade, I had this one friend. This guy, he was just better than me. He was better than me in every way one human being can be better than another. He was smarter than me. He had better grades than me. He was better looking than me. He was better dressed than me. He was more athletic than me. He was more well-spoken than me. In 7th grade, I hung out with this group of boys, of 7th grade boys. And most of us, we couldn't even get one girlfriend. This guy, he had like 6 in a row. And one of them was an 8th grader. That's how awesome he was. He was a 7th grader who got to date an 8th grader. So one day he sees me reading comic books at school, and he says to me, "Gene, if you keep reading comic books, you will never get a girlfriend." In 7th grade, I knew from the depths of who I was that I really wanted a girlfriend, so I took his advice. I stopped reading comics, I stopped buying comics, I took all the money that I would have spent on comic books, and I bought this instead. This is a denim jacket. In the 80s, if you wanted to be awesome, this is the way you would do it. You would have to buy a denim jacket and put it on. That's what I did. I bought this denim jacket, I put it on. And I went to school, and I waited for the ladies to come. So I waited through the 7th grade, through the 8th grade, through the 9th grade. And then in 10th grade, I just had to face facts. I looked myself in the mirror, and I was like, "Gene, this girlfriend thing is not going to happen for you." There I was, I had no girlfriend and no comic books in my life, and I was like, man, I could do something about one of these things. So I started buying comic books again, and here are some of my favorite comics when I was in high school. I loved the Hulk when I was in high school. I also loved this more obscure character, a superhero named the Spirit, and I loved Uncle Scrooge. I know most Uncle Scrooge fans are like 5 years old, but I loved him when I was 16. Incidentally, in case you were wondering, I got my first girlfriend a year after I started collecting comic books. So my friend was completely wrong. You could totally be a nerd and also find love. Those two things are not incompatible. I also started making comic books again. Gordon Yamamoto and the King of the Geeks is the first comic book that I did as an adult. I self-published it a year after I graduated from college. It's about a young man who gets a spaceship stuck in his nose, and then he becomes friends with the alien that's living inside of the ship, loosely based on my own life. About 10 years after this book, a small publisher called First Second Books put out my very first full-color graphic novel, a book called American Born Chinese. This came out in 2006, and the response that this book got from librarians, from teachers, from comic book fans was completely overwhelming. It was well beyond anything I could have imagined. It totally changed my life. It paved the way for me to become the full-time cartoonist that I am today. So I love comic books. That's the first thing that I love. The second thing that I love is computer coding, computer programming. How many of you have ever tried coding before? Anyone? Almost everybody. You guys are my kind of people. I fell in love with coding when I was in the 5th grade, and I fell in love with coding because of this machine right here. I know some of you younger kids are looking at that picture going, is that like a really fancy toaster? This is not a toaster, this is a computer. It's called an Apple IIe. Now the summer right after my 5th grade year started off great. I spent every day in front of the television. I watched episode after episode of Reading Rainbow, didn't read any of the books. My mom saw me do this and she was disgusted. She thought I was wasting my time. So she signed me up for these 4 summer enrichment classes. It has been 30 years since I took these classes, and now I only remember one of them. I only remember an introduction to computer coding class taught in a lab full of Apple IIes. In that lab, I fell in love with coding. I loved it so much that I ended up majoring in it in college. I got a degree in computer science from UC Berkeley. After that, I became a professional coder. I worked for a small company called VideoSoft in Emeryville. This is our office right here. And then after that, I became a high school computer science teacher. I taught coding to computer science students, to high school students for 17 years. So for most of my adult life, I have both drawn comic books and also either coded myself or taught other people how to code. However, even though I love these two things so much, they never really came together for me until pretty recently. For years, I would live my life like Batman. You know how Batman lives, right? By day, he has 2 jobs. By day, he is a billionaire playboy, and by night, he is a costumed crime fighter. My 2 jobs were almost as awesome. By day, I was a high school computer science teacher, and by night, I was a cartoonist. Well, just recently, just about a year and a half ago, these 2 worlds finally came together for me, and they came together in the form of this comic book series. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time. Secret Coders is a comic book series that teaches kids computer programming, teaches kids coding. The 4th one is the one in your hands, that's the orange one. Ultimately, there are going to be 6 total, so we have 2 more coming out next year. The 5th one's going to be green. We have no idea what color the 6th one's going to be yet. They're still deciding. This is a project that I'm doing with a friend of mine named Mike. That's what he looks like as a cartoon. Before working with me on Secret Coders, Mike actually drew comics for Adventure Time. So if you've read any Adventure Time comics, you may have read some of his stuff. He's an amazing cartoonist. Mike and I, we like to tell people that our books are kind of like Harry Potter, in part because we want our books to sell like Harry Potter, but also because you all know how Harry Potter goes, right? A group of kids, they find the secret school teaches magic, they learn magic and become wizards. Our story is almost the same thing. A group of kids, they find the secret school. The secret school, instead of teaching magic, teaches coding. So they learn how to code and become coders. Now, I am a huge Harry Potter fan. I'm Team Hufflepuff, in case you're wondering. But even as a Harry Potter fan, I can admit those books have a problem. There's something wrong with those books. And the problem is this. You read about these kids learning magic and becoming wizards. When you go home and you try those same things, do you get to be a wizard? No, you do not. Secret Coders does not have that problem. You read about these kids learning coding and becoming coders. When you go home and you try those same things, you also get to be a coder. Mike and I, our main characters are 3 7th graders. Their names are Hopper, Annie, and Josh. When I'm writing a book, when I'm coming up with characters, I like to have a real-world inspiration behind each of my characters. So each of these guys is actually inspired by somebody real. Hopper, the main character, she's inspired by a woman named Grace Murray Hopper, who is one of the most famous coders to ever walk the planet. She changed the way human beings code. A lot of people don't realize this, but coding, computer science, software development, began as what was considered a woman's profession. The very first coder in the world was a woman. Her name was Ada Lovelace. She lived in England. And early on, most of the coders working on computers were women. This was not for good reasons. This was because back in the day, when people looked at a computer, they thought, man, the hardware, that's the important stuff. So we'll have the men work on that. Software, not as important. We'll leave that to the women. Nowadays, we know differently. Nowadays, we know that the software is as important, if not more important than the hardware. But the result of this flawed and sexist way of thinking is that a lot of what we think as coding is actually built on ideas that women had, women like Grace Murray Hopper. And that is why I wanted to make sure my main character, the primary protagonist, was a young girl, a way of paying tribute to that history of computer science. Now, in the book, Hopper's best friend is a kid named Ennie. Ennie is really amazing at two things. He is amazing at coding, and he is amazing at basketball. Ennie is also inspired by somebody real. He's inspired by this guy right here. You all, of course, know who he is, because we are in Miami. Now, what a lot of people don't realize about Chris Bosh, even NBA fans, even Miami Heat fans, is that Chris Bosh is not just a basketball player. He is also a nerd. When he was in high school, he wasn't just on the varsity basketball team, he was also a part of his school's math club. He was in his school's National Honor Society. When he got into college, he was planning on pursuing a computer-related major. It was part of his family tradition. His dad was an engineer. His mom was a systems analyst. Eventually, though, he got so good at basketball that he left college for the NBA before graduating. Now, he had a great career in the NBA. He made a ton of money. But even now, he still loves computers. He still loves the world of math. He takes a lot of NBA money that he made and he invests it in tech companies because he wants to stay connected to technology, to computers. A lot of people think of school and sports, or basketball and coding as these two separate things, but they are not. There are plenty of people who love both and who are good at both, people like Chris Bosh. The last of my main characters is this kid named Josh. He starts off in the series as a bad guy. For most of book one, he is constantly making fun of Hopper and Ennie. He's kind of a jerk. But then by the time we get to book two, he kind of has a change of heart and he becomes a good guy. He becomes friends with Hopper and Ennie. Josh is based on a real world jerk that I know. He is inspired by my brother-in-law, Louis. Louis and I are actually good friends, but Louis loves to make fun of me, so I wanted to make a jerk character that's based on him. Louis is not a coder. He's actually a surgeon, but he still loves computers. To relax, he goes home and he works on his computer. So this is the way he lives. By day, he goes to the hospital, he opens up human beings, and he works on them to fix them. And at night, to relax, he goes home and he opens up his computer and he works on it to fix it. Louis loves computers so much. I don't totally know why he didn't become a coder, but he does make a pretty good living as a surgeon. Louis also has the pointiest nose of anybody I know, so I wanted to make the nose of the character who's based on him also pointy. Secret Coders is all about coding. Does anybody know what coding is? It sounds like a lot of you have done it. What exactly is coding? Young man, you want to say? What's coding? How would you define it? How would you define it? Yes. Okay, so he said coding is the creation of animation. Nowadays, computer animation is definitely created using coding. And behind that animation, what you're actually doing is you're telling the computer what to do. That's exactly what coding is. You're telling the computer what to do. You're giving a list of instructions for the computer to follow. And that's why they say, if you're a little bit bossy, if you like telling people what to do, you might make a good coder. So here is the process of coding. A coder usually will take an idea. This can sometimes be her own idea. This can sometimes be her boss's. She'll take that idea and she'll translate it into a list of instructions for the computer to run. That's the process. But there's a problem with this process, and the problem is that the coder and the computer speak two different languages. The coder usually speaks English or some other human language, and the computer does not. Deep down inside, the computer can only understand two values. It can only understand 1 and 0. So if that's all the computer can say is ones and zeros, what language do you write this list of instructions in? In the early days of computer science, that list of instructions was written in ones and zeros. Can you imagine if that was your job? 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0. It'd be terrible. Along comes Grace Hopper. Remember her? Here's how she changed the world of computer science. She came up with a brand new process for creating computers, for creating computer programs. After Grace Hopper's invention, now this is how we do coding. You still have a coder, you still have a computer, the coder still takes an idea and translates it into a list of instructions, but now that list of instructions is not written in ones and zeros, it is written in an English-like language. Not English, but English-like enough that a human being can easily read it and understand it. Then that list of instructions is put through what's called an interpreter or compiler. This is a piece of software that Grace Hopper invented. This piece of software translates that list of instructions that a human can easily read into a list of instructions in ones and zeros. With this brand new process, both the computer and the coder are happy because both of them are working in a language that they're used to, that they're comfortable in. You know, all the programs that we use today, whether it's on your desktop or on your laptop or on your phone, they're super complicated lists of instructions. None of that complexity would have been possible without Grace Hopper's invention. This first list of instructions that the human being can read is sometimes called source code. The second list of instructions, the one that's meant for the computer, is sometimes called object code. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about this object code. The language that it's written in, the 1 and 0 language, is called binary. I have to ask, do any of you know how to read binary? A couple of you. By the end of this presentation, everybody in this room is going to know how to read binary because I am going to teach you right now. So how does binary work? Let's take a look at a couple examples. Any idea what 0101 means in binary? Somebody want to take a guess? Somebody want to take a guess? Yes, young man? Maybe ACK? It actually means 5. Now, to normal people, 1000 means 1,000. What do you think it means in binary? Somebody want to take a guess? Yes. It means 8. Okay, so this young man knows how to read binary. And how about 1100? That means 1,100. What do you think it means in binary? It means 12. That's right. It means 12. Okay, so now if you don't know how to read binary, you're looking at this and you're going, what? What is going on? This is something Mike and I deal with in Secret Coders. So in Secret Coders, we have these little birds. They're called binary birds. And in this one scene, the binary bird sees Hopper's 7-shaped earring. Just like her best friend, Annie, Hopper is also a basketball player. 7 is her jersey number. That's why she wears these earrings. And when the bird sees this, the bird does this with its eyes. It freaks Hopper out. Birds are not supposed to have 3 eyes. So she asks her friend Annie about it, and Annie explains, these birds are robots, and their eyes display binary numbers. What are you talking about? Binary is how computers store numbers. Every computer has these, they're like little switches that can be on or off. A number is stored as a sequence of on and off switches, or in the bird's case, open and closed eyes. You make no sense. Take these 7 pennies. Let's play a game. So the game that Hopper and Annie are about to play, we're also going to play. Pay attention. I'm going to give you the rules in a second. I'm going to draw a board right here. You always carry pennies and chalk in your pocket. Shh, I'm concentrating on my drawing. Now look, I've got 4 columns of boxes here. The first column has 8 boxes, then 4, then 2, and then 1. I want you to fit all 7 of those pennies into these boxes, but there's a catch. When you're done, every column has to be either completely full of pennies or completely empty. No half-filled columns. Okay, and there's only one solution. So what I've got up here is a worksheet that I printed out from secret-coders.com. This worksheet is basically that board that Annie drew in the book. I also have 7 pennies. Do any of you think you can come up here and fit those 7 pennies into those boxes? Can I get a volunteer? Young lady right here, come on up. All right, let's give Carly a round of applause. And let's take a look at her solution. Are there any half-filled columns? No. So she did it right. In this game, every empty column represents a 0 in binary. Every full column represents a 1. So that means because there's 7 pennies on that board, 7 in binary is 0, 1, 1, 1. Let's try a second example. I'm going to add 3 more pennies so we have 10. Do any of you think you can come up and do this with 10 pennies? Anyone come up? Okay, young man, come on up. All right, let's give Kyle a round of applause. Any half-filled columns? No, so he did it right. So that means that 10, because there are 10 pennies, 10 in binary is 1, 0, 1, 0. Let's do one last example. I'm going to take away 4 pennies, so we'll have 6. Anybody want to come up here and do 6? All right, let's give Christian a round of applause. Go ahead. Any half-filled columns? So Christian did it right. That means that 6 in binary is? That's exactly it. So now you all know how to read binary numbers. In the book, Hopper comes up with that same solution for 7 that you all did in here, and then she realizes that 7 and empty, full, 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 0, 1, 1, 1, closed, open, 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 all the same thing. So that bird really was displaying 7 with its eyes. Let's talk a little bit about the source code. This is the piece of code that's written in that English-like language. That language is sometimes called a programming language, and there are literally dozens and dozens of programming languages that exist. The last one that came up on the screen, Logo, that's the first language that I learned. That's the language that I learned when I was in 5th grade on those Apple IIe's. Nowadays, kids have moved on to other languages. So if you're a 5th grader now, your first programming language probably isn't Logo. It's probably something like Scratch or Alice or Blockly. Even though Logo is kind of forgotten, I still love Logo. I love Logo because at the heart of this language is a little turtle. The turtle did not normally look like this and normally look like this because that is how bad graphics were in the 80s. And what you could do in Logo is you could give this little turtle commands and make it move around your screen and draw stuff. I love Logo so much that in my book, Secret Coders, I introduced a robot turtle that understands the Logo language. And I have this one scene where Hopper and Annie experiment by giving it different Logo commands. Even though Logo is an old language, even though it's kind of forgotten, you can actually download free versions for a modern computer. So we're going to do the exact same thing right now. We're going to experiment with a Logo turtle. And we're going to use the exact same commands that Hopper and Annie use in the book. So here are the 3 commands we're going to play with. Forward, left, and right. These 3 commands do exactly what they sound like they do. They tell the turtle how to move. Each of these commands has to be followed by a number. So forward, you give it a number that indicates the number of steps you want the turtle to take. You say something like forward 10, it'll take just a couple of steps, just a few steps, 10 steps. If you say something like forward 50, it'll move a lot further. For left and right, you give it an angle of turn. You tell the turtle how much you want it to turn. You give it a small number like 5, it's only going to turn a little bit. You give it a big number like 90, it's going to turn a lot. So here is what logo looks like on a modern computer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type in a command, forward 100, and the turtle moves forward 100. It leaves a line 100 steps long. Not super exciting. Let's get a little bit more exciting. Let's say I want to extend that line to a square. What would the next command be? Somebody want to tell me? Next command? Young lady right there with the bow. Turn right 90. Okay, let's do that. Right 90. And then the line after that, somebody else give me another line. Go ahead. Forward 100. Okay, that's half the square. Somebody else? Yes? Right 90. Oops, I spelled right wrong, huh? Okay, and then, yes? Forward 100. Okay, and then, yes, young lady right there? Uh-huh. Go ahead. Somebody want to help her out? Somebody want to help her out? Go ahead. All right, and somebody give me, just yell out the last line. What's the last line going to be? And there it is. That's a square. So that's a little bit more exciting, but still not super exciting. I want you to notice that in order to create that square, what we had to do was we had to type the same line of code over and over and over again. And anytime you have to do that, in coding, there is a better way. In Logo, the better way is to use what's called a repeat command. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to do the exact same thing we just did with all those lines of code with just a single line. In addition, Logo gives you a shortcut version for each of those commands. So instead of typing the whole word forward, we could just type in FD. Instead of typing the whole word right, we could just type in RT. Instead of typing the entire word left, we can type in LT. So I'm going to start with the CS, which stands for clear screen, to start over. And now watch this one line. I'm going to say repeat, for, and then forward 100, and right 90. Let me check it out because I can't see it from where I am. Repeat for, forward 100, right 90. Now when I hit return, one line makes that same square. Okay, let's get a little bit more exciting. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to type in a line of code. It's going to have 2 repeats in it. I want you to see if you can figure out what's going to show up on the screen when I hit return. Okay, so I'll start off with the CS again. Now watch this. I'm going to say repeat 36. Repeat 4. Forward 100. Right 90. And then right 10. So I wrote repeat 36, repeat 4, forward 100, right 90, right 10. What's going to show up when I hit return? Somebody take a guess. Take a guess. Yes. It's going to be a big square. It's going to be a big square. One more guess. A circle. Yes? Triangle. Okay, let's check this out. Ready? Ready? Here we go. Here we go. So what is that? Somebody explain to me what we're looking at. What are we looking at right there? Yes? That's right. Do you hear this young lady? She got it right. Have you coded before? She sounds like a coder. What we're actually looking at right there, 36 squares rotated around a point. We told it to repeat 36 times. The repeat 4 makes a square. The repeat 36 makes 36 squares, and they're rotated around a circle. Let's do one last example. That's a little bit more complicated. I'm going to say repeat 1,000. Let's make it 10,000. Repeat 4, then forward 100, right 90, right 10, and then I'm going to add these few last instructions. Set PC, random, 16. Let me make sure I type this right. So it says, repeat 10,000, repeat 4, forward 100, right 90, right 10, set PC, random 16. Set PC is short for set pen color. We are telling the turtle to pick out of 16 different colors. When I hit return, what are we going to see on the screen? Somebody tell me. Somebody take a guess. Yes. 10,000 squares that are all different colors. Okay, 10,000 squares, different colors. All right, let's take a look. Here we go. Ready? I'm going to hit return. So what are we looking at? What we're looking at is essentially what these young men said up here. I think they're coders too. But what we're looking at is 10,000 squares arranged in a circle because we told the turtle to pick a random color for each of the squares. Once he finishes a full round on the circle, 36 squares, from the 37th on, we're drawing on top of other squares. Right? That's why it looks like it's flashing. And this is why I fell in love with coding in that lab full of Apple IIe's when I was in 5th grade. I'd always been interested in art, and what I realized in that lab was if I learned how to code, I could get a little bit better as an artist. And I would submit to you all that no matter what you want to do in life, whether you want to be a teacher, whether you want to be a doctor, whether you want to own a store, no matter what you want to do in life, if you learn how to code, you're going to be a little bit better. Because coding is not just about typing code into a computer, it's actually also about training your brain to think a certain way. It's about training your brain to take complex things and break them up into simple pieces. And that kind of skill will be useful to you no matter what you do. So I would encourage you all, sign up for a coding class. You can even go on my website, secret-coders.com. I have 3 lessons that'll get you started in old school coding and logo coding. Learn how to code and get a little bit better. Once again, I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes left. Are there any questions that I can answer for any of you? You all can line up right there in the middle.
If you have questions, sorry, that was to make sure you're awake. If you do have questions for our author, we do have a microphone in the middle of the room. Please line up. We have about 10 minutes or so for questions, and we'll take one at a time. I know some of you
Wow,
are
that's a lot of questions.
because the buses are here for school.
All right, young man. Young man in the front, you want to start?
How many books did you make?
Okay, so the question is, how many books did I write, right? I have to be honest, I've kind of lost track. You know, for DC Comics, I write an issue every month, and I've been working for them for like 2-3 years. So I have maybe like 40 or 50 comics now that I've written. But thank you for the question.
Welcome. When were you born?
What's that?
When were you born?
The question is, when was I born? So you're asking how old I am. I want you to guess first. How old do you think I am? 26? You're like my new best friend. I'm actually 44. My wife and I, we have 4 kids at home. 44, yes.
What is your advice for your fellow cartoonists?
Say that again.
What is your advice for your fellow cartoonists?
Are you a cartoonist?
Kinda.
Oh, awesome, awesome. Okay, so the question is, what's my advice for fellow cartoonists? Number 1 is draw and write and read constantly, as much as you can. Okay? And second is, now is an exciting time to be a cartoonist because you no longer have to rely on a publisher to gather an audience. You can go and you can put your work directly online. And I would totally encourage you to do that if you're a young cartoonist.
Thank you. Right, thank you.
Are any of your books gonna turn into movies?
Okay, so the question is, are any of my books going to be turned into a movie?
Yeah.
So I do have a movie agent, and I've had meetings, but nothing has ever come of them. So I don't know. It'd be fun. It'd be fun if one of my books got turned into a movie, but at the same time, I'm a book guy. I'm really happy about the book. If I die and there's never a movie made about anything that I've done, I'm fine with that. But thank you.
Do you know who created binary code?
Do I know who painted what?
Who created binary?
Who?
Binary code.
Oh, who created binary code? Binary code is an old thing. Nobody is sure who created it because it goes back centuries. So some people think that there is a concept. This might be more than you were asking about. But there's a concept in Taoism, in a Chinese religion called Taoism, called the Ba Gua, and some people point to that as the beginning of binary code. But we don't know for sure. Great question. Yes.
In the language 1 and 0, how do you know what is like 90 and stuff? Like,
So you're talking about
numbers?
in the language of ones and zeros, how do you do a number like 90? That is a great question. I've been hoping for that question, and here's the answer. So you'll notice that on this sheet, the biggest number that we can do is 15, because there are only 15 squares, right? But what you can do is you can keep adding columns to the left. I want you to guess, how many squares do you think is going to be in the next column?
16,
16, that's right. In the column after that,
32.
32, and it keeps going on. Every column is twice as big as the one that came before. You can have as many columns as you want, so you can store as large of a number as you want, and that's how you do the other numbers. Great question.
Did it take you a long time to learn the language of ones and zeros?
Did it take me a long time to do what?
To learn the language with the ones and zeros.
To make the book? Are you asking if it took me a long time to make the book?
Did it take you a long time to learn the language of the ones and zeros?
I'm sorry, I still can't hear you. Let's wait a little bit. Let's wait for a second. We'll wait for some of the folks to clear out, and then we'll try one more time. Okay, so you're asking, did it take me a long time to learn binary? Yeah. It did. It took me a little while to understand it. So I'm hoping that through Secret Coders, I could teach kids so that it won't take as long for kids to understand it. Kids today to understand it. Great question.
How many readers did you have in your first comic series?
How many pages did I have in my first comics?
How many readers did you have?
Oh, how many readers did I have? Okay, so the very first comic book series that I did when I was a kid was in 5th grade. We sold $8 worth at 50 cents a piece, so we had 16 readers. And then the first comic that I did as an adult was Gordon Yamamoto, the King of the Geeks. For issue number 1, I sold 700 of them. So not a lot, not like by book numbers, that's not a lot. So I started really, really small. 16 is a very small number. You could beat me, I bet. If you make a comic today, I bet you could beat 16.
Thank you. How much books did you make?
How many books did I make? I gotta say I've lost count. I think it's like 30, 40, somewhere around there. It's a decent number.
What inspired you to make Secret Coders?
So the question is, what inspired me to make Secret Coders? Well, like I told you, I was a high school computer science teacher. I always taught in this very visual way. I did a lot of drawing on the board. And I thought, man, a lot of this stuff could work really well in a comic book. So that was my inspiration, was what was happening with my students in my classroom when I was a teacher.
How many times take you to write Secret Coders?
How many what?
Time take you to write Secret Coders?
How much time did it take?
Yes.
The first one took a long time. The first one maybe took almost a year to do, to just write, not even the drawing part, but just write. But then after that, we figured out the world, we figured out the characters, we figured out how things would look, and the other ones were much faster. Maybe the rest of it took me maybe a year and a half to do the other 5.
Do you have a wife?
Do I have a wife? I do. I have a wife. We've been married for 17 years, and we have 4 kids. How old are you? Can I ask?
What?
How old are you?
I'm 9.
You're 10?
9.
9. So I have a 10-year-old daughter. One of our 4 kids is 10.
How does Mike look in real life?
How does Mike look in real life? He looks a lot more handsome than the cartoon. A lot more handsome.
What what is your favorite character of the Secret Coders?
What's my favorite comic? Like the favorite book in the series? I tell you, I always like the last one I did. So it's probably the last one. Oh, my favorite part of Secret Coders? Well, okay, so here's the secret about Secret Coders. Here's the secret. We don't reveal this secret until book 5, so you're gonna find out early. Secret Coders, the whole series, is actually a sequel. It's a sequel to a book that was written in the late 1800s. So characters from that book show up in Secret Coders, and I think the part where we reveal that was probably the funnest part for me to write.
When did you make your first book?
I made my first comic book when I was in 5th grade. I wrote my first story probably in 2nd grade. It was not a very good story. It's about these dogs that found a UFO. Not very good. I never finished it. I wrote like 3 pages and then I went to do something else. Play Legos or something, I don't remember.
How many pages did your first comic have?
The first, like that comic that I did in 5th grade, I think we had like 10 pages. It was not very long. It was like nowadays, most comics that I do for DC Comics are 20 pages long. So it was half as long as the comics that I do now.
You said that you know how to do binary code. How come you can't add a 2 in binary code?
Say that again?
How come you can't put a 2 in binary code?
How did I get into binary code?
No, why can't you put a 2 in binary code?
How come you can't put 2 in binary? Oh, you can. You can put 2 in binary. So 2 in binary, take a look. So we use 2 pennies, right? 2 in binary is that. So what is 2 in binary? 0, 0, 1, 0. Was that your question? Okay. Yep.
I have 2 questions.
Yes.
Did you ever do like a normal book, or did you only do comics?
Did I ever make like a book with no pictures in it?
No, pictures only, not there's only squares and they're only writing stuff.
Yeah, I really have only. Oh, you mean like when I was coding? Did I make other programs?
No, when you were writing books.
Oh, when I was writing books, so all the books that I've done have been graphic novels and comic books. I have not yet done any other kind of book, but someday I hope I will. Right now, though, I have lots of stories that I want to do as comics or graphic novels.
Oh, and what advice do you have for other people who want to write books?
If you want to write books, you got to do a lot of reading and you got to do a lot of writing. And I would say at your age, just try to write a little bit every day. Like if you just write a couple sentences every day, by the end of the year, you'll have a book.
Okay.
Okay, so we can do 2 more questions. Go ahead.
How old were you when your first book got published?
When I first got published, I was probably, I published myself, and I did that when I was in 5th grade, and then I did that as an adult when I was 21.
Your first book.
But the first time I got published by somebody else, by a company, was probably in my late 20s. I was probably 27, 28, somewhere around there.
Okay, bye, thank you.
Okay, so this is gonna have to be the last question. I'm sorry to everybody behind her, but this is gonna have to be the last question. Go ahead.
Was your first book a good book?
Was my first book a good book? The first book that I did, after I finished, I thought it was amazing. But then now when I look back, I don't think it's amazing anymore. Even though it's not an amazing book, I'm still happy that I finished it. So no matter what, you should, if you want to be a writer, finish those books. Finish the books that you write. Once again, thank you all so much for being here. It was great to get this chance to talk to you all. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here today. I know the buses are here. Our author is signing books around the corner